Oh, I hit continue. Got it.
Yep. There you go. So, hello.
Hi,
To start off with, would you like to just say your name and where you are?
Marilyn Lammert. I'm in Ballackinwood, Pennsylvania, which is like across the street from Philadelphia, city limits of Philadelphia.
Okay, interesting. So, the first question for you, I don't know you well, but I'm interested. I'd really like to get to know you a bit better. So, the first question is, who are you as a person, as a human being? And you can answer that about your values, your qualities, your passions, your whatever you'd like.
I am a person who really likes to connect to other people. Um, I'm pretty dogged about that, and or focused on that, I guess. Um, and I'd say I'm a pretty curious person, and I really like to learn about things that are interesting to me. Things that aren't interesting to me, but things that are interesting to me, I really like to learn it. People, I like to learn about people, and curious about differences and different people and experiences and like that.
Okay. And I'm wondering what comes to mind as an event or a set of circumstances in your life that may have shaped a bit of who you are.
I've heard you ask this question before, so I did think about this question, but it would come to mind regardless. When I was about, let's see, 25, 24, 23, something like that, I had ulcerative colitis and I was hospitalized for a month. I almost died. And I mean, it was a stupid thing. The doctor should never have put me in the hospital. I wasn't that sick when I went in, but I got sicker the longer I was in. And at the time, I was pretty isolated, and so it was a pretty traumatic experience, and not good doctors. Not it's just bad. And I came out of that. It never got better really, and I came out depressed and I think I was probably depressed before, but really depressed. And uh, I come from a family that is, we're the helpers, we're not the people that get help. And so, people were supposed to come to us. And so I I remember making a decision that I am going to have to reach out to people, that I can't go on this way. If I'm going to live, that's what I have to do. And of course, I got into therapy, which again, in my family, we didn't do. So I think that changed my life. I know that changed my life. It was sort of the worst thing that happened to me and the best thing that happened to me.
Okay. And also in a sort of person shaping way, I'm wondering who, another human being, somebody who you might identify, you would say has also shaped or influenced who you are.
Um, well, let's see. I went not right after that, about 10 years later, I went for training with Irv and Miriam Poster. And the month in La Jolla one summer and then back another next summer. And I had gotten my MS. Actually, I was about to graduate with my MSW when I was in the hospital for my graduation, and I was not interested in clinical work. Well, I went into thinking that I was going to be a school counselor, but because I had been briefly an elementary school teacher, which was terrible. I was terrible at it, and I didn't like it.
Yeah,
And
that's like a vocational thing. You have to really.
yeah, it was not me. It was because I'm of the era that, and of the subculture that the choices for women, I was always told, was secretary, nurse, or teacher. And
Mm-hmm.
I already knew I didn't like to take orders from people, and I didn't like blood. So teaching was left. But
Hmm.
was so but I didn't like psychodynamic stuff, and it was either that or behaviorism was what was being taught, and it was the mid-60s. And I had a job this was in St. Louis. I went to school at Washington, and at an inner city settlement house, and I loved it. And so I was a group work major, that you could do that, but I was basically a community organizer. So I did not do clinical work, and well, I did some, but as part of a field internship, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. So I, I taught. I went back to Washington U 3 years after I was out and taught there as a field instructor. And I realized I really liked teaching adults. I didn't like teaching sixth graders, but I did really like teaching adults. And the dean at the time said, if you want to teach, you have to have a doctorate. And I did not want a social work doctorate. And I wasn't really interested clinically. And I had been in the hospital, and I had very clear views about what was wrong with the medical care system. So I got a doctorate, moved to the East Coast, and got a doctorate in health medical care organization from the School of Hygiene and Public Health at Johns Hopkins. I've never used it. I mean, I don't like research. I don't like administration, and that's what it. But as I've said, it allowed me to teach. And when I was in practice, I could call up a doctor's office and say, this is Dr. Lammert, and that sometimes got me through to the doctor.
Yeah, something that says doctorate from Johns Hopkins is a very handy little piece of paper to have.
So, so after I got that degree, I taught at the School of Social Work and School of Nursing at University of Maryland in Baltimore. And one of the people I taught with had done some work with furrows in California before he came to Maryland. And I got into therapy with a Gestalt therapist who was one of the, I think, it was early when Irvin and Miriam were in California. And he went and he said, you have to do this, Marilyn. So I did. And I hadn't really done any clinical work. I was totally lost. Um, but that's how I got into clinical work. And my work, um, I would say, with both of them, but probably primarily with Irv, was because I had a very difficult relationship with my dad, who was also shaped me a lot, was pretty life-changing, I think. In fact, my husband told me I should mention this because I have said it. When I came back the second year, um, I was by now 35, and I hadn't been married, which is really unusual for people in my generation, women in my generation. Shortly after I got back, I met my husband, and now husband, and I was different when I got back. And I think that that's how not how I met him, but how we got together. So that's
Hmm.
pretty life changing. We've been married 41 years.
Oh. I'm wondering what changed.
I think I changed, um, at least for the periods right after I got back. I mean, Southern California in the this was in the late 70s, pretty free and easy and loose and all of that. And I come from a very tight, kind of rigid Germanic background. So
Mhm.
I
Hmm.
think I was different.
And so you would say that the person who you met was Miriam?
Well, I met Miriam and Irv together,
Hmm.
but I think I did the deepest work with Irv.
With Irv. Okay.
Yeah.
Huh. And what is it about him in particular, or is it the work that you think?
Well, it was the whole group. I mean, really, the permission to be myself, and the permission, I guess, to go deep with the wounding and to be held. I mean, sometimes literally held as I went through it. Um, yeah, something like that.
And so that's kind of how you got into Gestalt and some of the training. And I'm also interested in asking what it is that has held you there, because you've been in Gestalt for a few years. What is that part of it that is most interesting or that captivates you in some way?
Oh, well, I couldn't do it at first. I mean, this idea of you're just in the present moment and you just go with whatever's there. I mean, it's like, what? But so different from, planning out the goals you want to get the client to and then working. I mean, that's so boring in relation to, so Gestalt, the invitation to be curious. I think that was the thing that really attracted me and kept me. Um, yeah.
And what has it kept you doing? What has been your participation in Gestalt over the years?
Well, when I started soon after I finished the training, I started a small private practice, but I was still in academia, um, and um, and then I got turned down for tenure at Catholic University in D.C. because I wasn't committed to the mission of the school, was what I was told. I had the teaching evaluations and I wrote, which I do not like nor do well writing, but I did it. But it turned out, it was really a good thing because even though I was devastated at the time, because I had two small kids at the time and I had this little private practice and I was teaching and it was like overwhelming. So it simplified my life, but it meant that I had to make up the income. And so I had to build a practice, which I did by cold calling physicians because I wanted to work with people who had issues like mine of, stress related illnesses, things that got worse with stress and that were emotionally related. Of course, people didn't then particularly didn't easily come to psychotherapists for that. But I sent letters to gastroenterologists, and one guy in particular started sending me clients, and then I just did this cold calling, which was awful, but it did get me started, and I built a practice that I had for 35 years.
Wow.
The unfortunate part about it is that in Washington, D.C., there was not a Gestalt community, which I really missed, and I wasn't in a position to go, I did training in Philadelphia. I went back to California a couple of times, but I missed a lot because I just didn't have the energy to, go. And I tried building, I did do some training there, but.
So do you feel now like you found that Gestalt community? Have you been able to make those connections?
Yeah, well, it's funny because I went for a week-long training to California a couple years after I finished the training, and I roomed with two of the people that started the Gestalt Institute here in Philadelphia, Joyce Lewis and Mary Lou Shack, um, and they all kind of tended to think of me as part of the origin of the institute, but I really was, and invited me to come and teach and stuff, which I didn't because I just didn't have the bandwidth to do that. So when I moved here, I did know people, and I've been here 4.5 years now in Philadelphia, and I'm very involved in the institute here, so that's good.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm also wondering what you would say some of the greatest challenges that you faced in and around Gestalt, either as a person, as a practitioner, over the years.
Well, in the environment that I practiced, it was seen as, you know, crazy. I mean, people had the image of, you know, Fritz with, what's the, you know, that thing
Gloria?
online. Yeah, Gloria, right. And so the, you know, the prevailing view was so negative. Um, so it was counter, you know, it was working in the middle of that, which was very hard for me because I really like to belong. And
Hmm.
I didn't really feel like I belonged. Um, I've forgotten now what your question was.
The challenges,
Oh, yeah, so
maybe
that was a challenge.
belonging.
That was a challenge,
Hmm.
yep. And I've had various medical issues throughout my life after that in my 20s. And um, I have two children, both of whom are adopted, and they're actually like 6 months apart in age. So
Wow.
when when I was teaching, uh, you know, they were 2 and 2, or 2 and 2.5. And so um, that was challenging. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
And that's another more personal question, which I wonder if you'd like to speak to, is a bit about how you experience yourself, um, either as a woman or in your gender, um, that part of your identity. How have you lived that within Gestalt, and does Gestalt have anything to do with that?
Well, I was just talking to somebody I've known for a long time, since, yeah, since the 70s today, and a guy. And, you know, there's a big change from my generation, and even 5 or 10 people, women who are 5 or 10 years younger, because um, the being able, having the confidence in myself to speak, and also being paid attention to, you know, like the classic being in a meeting and having an idea, saying it, and nobody responds, I'm ignored.
Hmm.
You know, 15 minutes later, a man says it, and people think, oh, that's a great idea. And that
Right.
happened repeatedly. Now, I don't say that in Gestalt circles because I really wasn't in Gestalt circles that much. So I don't um, really tie it to that. Um, but I do think it happened, for sure, it happens in Gestalt circles. So, yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question or not.
Yeah, no, it's just I came to the question because I was thinking about what you said about, having little kids. I'm kind of in that phase. My kids are 11 and 4 right now, so they're not
Yeah.
quite twins almost like yours, but just that it sort of the motherhood and the career kind of thing.
Oh,
And
yeah.
just being aware of it and experiencing it, it's like, oh, yeah, it's part of
Yeah.
understanding self as woman. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Not always fun, not always easy. Um,
No, definitely not.
but it's definitely an interesting series of choices to have to continually be making.
And it is, it's constantly choices. That was always, I mean, I see my daughter, I see her making them, you know, and being struggling with them all the time. She has 2 kids. And yeah, it's just constant. I mean, moment to moment, really, day to day. I mean, I'm sure you know, it's choices. And you know, I didn't travel to go to Gestalt things, or you know, AGT when it started, because that's time away, and it's just too much. And yeah, I mean, I did some, but I mean, you know, that's right. It's choices, choices, choices.
Mhm.
Yep.
Hmm. I'm, I don't know if you want to say any more about your experience as an adoptive parent. I don't know many adoptive parents. So is
Well,
that more
yeah.
personal than you want to get? That's fine.
Well, I think we were very lucky. Um, I mean, we ran into problems because, one, first of all, agencies, because I had been ill, I was turned down some places. Because I worked, even though I didn't work, you know, I was teaching, so I was home a lot, turned down at that time. My husband had been married before, what he calls his starter marriage. And so we turned down actually some in Mexico because of that.
The Catholic
So,
adoption agencies, yeah.
yep. And so our daughter, I wrote letters to doctors in Pennsylvania. And because Pennsylvania, you can adopt privately that way. In Maryland, you couldn't. And this doctor was the doctor for her birth mother. And, it worked out really well. Um, and and both kids wanted to be connected to their birth families, and so that happened. We had a connection through him, through the doctor, because we ended up being friends with he and his wife and their kids, and so she's connected to him. I actually ran into her aunt online the other day, and then our son is from Korea. Is born in Korea, and came when he was seven and a half months old. And that was a whole different thing. And it hard, I mean, really hard on him. And he had been with his foster mother the whole time. And so he came depressed, but he's he's a terrific person. And he also wanted to connect. So I've been to Korea 3 times. Once first with him, and then with a friend of mine who's a Korean American therapist, and to do some more searching. And then our whole family went and met his birth family. So that was, quite, and that was the other thing that I was very involved in, was learning about adoption and about international adoption, and about racism in terms of Asian Americans, and all of that kind of thing. And so that was a big part of all of our lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just sort of taking that in. Sorry. um, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, being a mother to children who are from a different culture. I mean, my children are Mexican cultured.
Yeah.
But it's a whole different set of concerns that
Yeah. Well,
your kids will go through things culturally and racially that you've
you
never
don't.
experienced.
That's right. Right. It's a. I'm sorry. That's in the parking lot. Somebody's horn is stuck. It'll turn off in a moment.
Yeah.
There. Yeah. And that's it's another sort of wrinkle in being a parent.
That's true. That's true. Well, another one of the questions that I do have is about what some of your greatest memories would be, either as a person or within Gestalt, or maybe they coincide somehow. But what are some of those more fulfilling experiences that you've had?
Um, well, I think my Gestalt training was a really terrific experience. Each time was a very interesting, great group of people. One person I met actually lives in Philadelphia, and I'm still very close to her, and she was very involved in our family. And funny thing, in 2014, when AAGT was at Asilomar, were you there?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, well, I didn't meet you. I was there. Don't remember. But anyway, um, I, I walking along, and this guy looks familiar, and he's somebody that was in my training in 1978. And I hadn't had any contact with him since then, but we had been really close during the training. He was a really good guy. And that was wonderful, to, sort of have that connection. Um, and yeah, so because it was just such a different experience being around people in this Gestalt frame of curiosity and much more casualness that I had any experience with. Yeah, so those were important. I don't think I'm connected to anybody else from back then, but I still have the group of, the being in the group and what happened outside the training, because we lived in a hotel the first year and lived in at UC, whatever, Southern California, the Hoya campus of, and so, we hung out the whole month.
It's sort of the bonding, trauma bonding, maybe the bonding experience.
Yeah.
Interesting. And I'm also interested to know what either you personally would like to do within Gestalt going forward, or if you have any other plans outside of Gestalt, and also where you think Gestalt could or should be going in the future.
Well, I retired from my practice when I moved to Philadelphia, so I don't see clients. But I'm very interested in the use of Gestalt in life. And I'm very interested in the use of Gestalt in terms of social justice work. And so, trying to think conceptually about those things, that's interesting to me.
Do you want to say a bit more about how you see that?
Well, so my history in terms of social justice is that my dad was a Protestant minister, and in the late 40s, early 50s, was very active in civil rights. And so I, at age 6, with one other girl, attended there was a small sort of segregated Black community near where we lived, and he got connected to the minister of that church. So I went to the vacation Bible school at that church, and I loved it. And of course, I was I was different, and everybody was interested in me because I was different. But and then I when I did the community organizing, I was in that church-related settlement house. Now, the problem with it all is that it was a very, what's the word? I don't want to say patronizing, that's a little too extreme, but it was a very, they're the person that need help, we're the people that give help. It was,
right.
And I have continued to work hard to notice that in myself, because I've lived it, and so we're doing things at the Gestalt Institute here in Philadelphia, and I'm trying to do a lot of training and work on myself in regards to that, and it's very challenging. And I don't think I'm very good at it. I make mistakes a lot, but I'm working at it. And so I like having the experience and then trying to think about it theoretically, but mostly I'm just trying to get better at it personally, and how that connects to how I teach, and that's all interest to me. And the other big interest in my life is groups. I have been since graduate school, groups, and I'm just fascinated. And when I was in practice, I had always a couple of therapy groups going, and it's what I loved more than anything. So, yeah.
I'm kind of sitting with the term community organizing. I'm just wondering if you can unpack that for me a little bit. What is it? How do you organize community? What is that part of your work about?
Well, I don't actively do it now, but I'm sort of always, that's sort of my frame.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, what I did then was um, I went door to door in a high-rise public housing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that was one job, and just finding out what it was people wanted and needed, and then trying to help people organize to get what it was they wanted. Um, and I mean, that's basically what community organizing is, I think. Um, and you know, and then working with, as they got organized, working with a group of people to be able to go after what they wanted in an effective way, and working with the process of how that happened, and trying to be both a part of it and not a part of it at the same time, you know?
Mm-hmm. Sort of the catalyst facilitator kind of
Yeah.
role.
Uh, but on a, you know, I mean, one on an equal level, not,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I can tell you what to do, how to do it the right way, but
Right.
I have certain knowledge, but you have certain knowledge, and how do we do that together? I like working that way. I really like working that way. Um, yeah.
That sounds also a lot like Gestalt facilitation and teaching.
Yeah. Actually, I just spent the afternoon working on a interview questions for group facilitators that we're hiring. So that I'm going to be interviewing one of the people, interviewing them.
Well,
So
that sounds like fun. Actually, that sounds
it
like fun
does.
to me. So I don't know what that says about
It
me,
does.
but
Yeah, it does.
that
It
sounds
is.
like fun.
I like thinking
Hmm.
about it. And
Okay. Hmm. Okay. Well, I'm wondering if there's anything else at this point that you would like to add that you feel is a part of your person that maybe I haven't come to, or anything else you'd like to say.
um, I think this business of getting old is is something. um, and you know how much to do and how long to do it, and how to be taken seriously when certain things don't work as well. Um,
Mm.
that's has its difficulties, and it's also interesting in a certain way. Um, and I'm really aware of that. Um, I have parents that lived into their 90s and were active until then. So you know, that's my model. Um, but on the other hand, I get tired more than I did 10 years ago. And
Hmm.
so it's,
I think that's important. And actually, several people have touched on it because it's like, I asked you who you are and how you are now. And age is a part of that. And I think mortality is definitely part of that as well. And some of
yes,
us have the experience of realizing that we're mortal, and for all the therapy that we do, we're going to be mortal for the rest of our short little lives.
yes, we will.
But
Well, that,
a lot of people tend to grab onto therapy and try and pretend that we can avoid that. So the way that therapists grapple with mortality and aging and decomposing and falling apart is a very interesting process.
right. Well,
Uh,
and this reminds me of the other piece of me that we haven't talked about that is important, is the spiritual part. So I left the church, the organized church, and have never gone back. But I'm very interested in and have explored various things spiritually, Buddhism to a certain extent, although it's a little too disembodied to me. And but I did a training in 20 years ago in um, Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah, and this guy put together that and Buddhism and Western psychology into a sort of a healing and a spiritual and a modality. And that and and is very meaningful to me. And in fact, I've been in a Torah study group for probably 15 years with people from that training. That is very important to me weekly, even though, you know, I'm not Jewish. But in terms of dealing with issues like mortality and death, that's, and it's interestingly very, what's the word? Congruent, or works with Gestalt. And
I was going to ask you, Peter Cole asked Daisy yesterday in an interview I did with them. He said, do you feel that your spirituality has a place in Gestalt?
I've had some conversation about this with Peter and Daisy once.
Okay. So I'll borrow the question, and what would your answer be?
Well, I think what would say the question again? Does spirituality
Do you feel
have a
like your
place?
spirituality has a place? Does it fit?
Well, I think most people don't think it does. Most Gestalt people don't, but there are people who do, and I think it does. Yes, I think. I think when we talk about meeting, that there's something else that arises that isn't me and it isn't you. And I think that's spiritual. And yeah, so, and I have in my mind, that's one of, so I didn't think of this as the answer to your earlier question, but I think that's one of the things that I am interested in focusing on as I have the opportunity, and you know, as I can make the opportunity, I guess, too, because it's very interesting to me, and I think, yeah, it's very interesting to me and close to my heart. Yeah.
I know it's just a little taste, but is there anything else that you feel like you'd like to add right now?
I don't think so. I'm looking out my window at the other part of the building. This is a building of like 70 apartments, and more than 80% of the people in this building are Jewish. And so the whole belonging thing has been an issue for me because I'm not Jewish. And, but we've done things that I have connections and made connections here. So I do feel that the belonging, but just the idea of this building, it's a co-op, the building, so it has more of a sense of a community than probably what's the other kind of, let's see, this is what happens. This is aging. I can't remember the word.
I'm
Yeah, you know, well, it'll
the
come
ones
to me
that are
sometime.
not co-ops. The
Yeah,
ones you
right.
just live in.
Right. It's another word where, you know, somebody, you just pay rent and you're not a part of the management of it at all. This has some more community to it. And I like that. And so I and another friend of mine in the building who happens also to be a therapist, we started a music on the balcony. You know, we saw the Italians. We can't exactly match the Italians, but we, at once a week, from March till we stopped the 4th of July, we'll start again in September of doing playing, he got speakers playing music from, we don't have people who sing that much, but we do have some singing from the balcony, and some people go down to the parking lot. And that, to me, I really like the community aspect of it. That's really important to me. And I like being a part of that.
That sounds very important. Just, you know, as aging therapists, I think that all of that life experience might lead us to age differently and to be able to come into that phase of life in a different way. We've been living in a different way.
Right.
The other years, the community building kind of comes back again. And
yeah, it does feel like circling around
transferable
again.
Skills.
Right. Right. And
Yeah,
getting,
interesting.
Yeah. And
Well,
getting
I'll
to
tell you
know the
about some
community
friends here in
around.
Mexico who have retired from their therapy practice and live in communal housing as
Yeah,
retired
well,
therapists.
right.
So,
Well, if I think, I remember reading years ago about women who lived together in their old
mhm,
age and, bought a house. And I certainly would do that if I weren't married. And this is sort of the closest I can come to it. And, do what my husband will also agree to. Um,
that's
but yeah, I think that community and connections as you get older, that to me, that's makes all the difference.
true. Okay. Well, thank you. I really appreciate your time, and I'm enjoying getting to know you in the spaces that we seem to keep meeting up.
Yeah,
So,
me too.
yeah, I
Thank
would
you.
just like
Thank
to
you
say
for
thanks if it's
encouraging
okay
me.
with you. Oh, yeah, it was a pleasure. Is it okay with you if we leave it here?
Sure.
Okay.